Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on The Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. What can living with wild wolves teach us about how to eat and live as humans? Well, today, believe it or not, we're here with a woman who actually lived amongst wild wolves in the Arctic Circle. And this is actually a throwback episode of the show from all the way back in 2012, which is, 7 years ago. Mind blowing at this point. But just because it's not new doesn't mean it's not relevant. In fact, I think a lot of listeners really need this message more than ever. Nora certainly spreads a lot of wisdom. So anyway, we're here today with Nora Gedgaudas, and she's the author of Primal Body, Primal Mind, and also maintains a private practice in Portland, Oregon, as both a board-certified nutritional consultant and a clinical neurofeedback specialist. And so I also just want to say, even though this is a throwback episode, we're doing it because it's the holidays, and we think this one is special. But I'm not going off the grid for another year. We're not, as far as we know, losing internet for another year. So don't worry, we're not going off the grid again. There are a ton of new episodes of this show that I've already recorded that we're going to be putting out over the next few weeks and months ahead, and I'm really excited for the ones that I haven't recorded yet. I don't want to spoil all of it, though. So just be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, wherever you watch videos. But know that you can always get this show for free without outside advertising or any social media nonsense at fatburningman.com and all the other goodies at ablejames.com. So before we get to the interview, here's a review for the Fat Burning Man Show that came in from Joe on iTunes. He says, "Beware the hidden costs. About a year ago, I made a change and decided to follow some better health advice. The first episode I listened to was with Dr. Bill Davis, Wheat Belly. From there, I was hooked. Not only is the advice from Abel and his guests real, honest, accurate, and devoid of corporate influence, but it really works. In May of 2016, I weighed in at 290 pounds, and just last week passed the 205 mark. Many of my friends have noticed and say things like, 'You look like you have lost weight.' I always have to correct them. You see, I'm in sales, and I don't like losing. Also, lost things have the potential one day to be found, and I have no intention of finding that old self again. So instead, I tell people that I'm shedding weight, and if they want to know how, they should listen to the Abel James podcast. However, that recommendation also comes with a warning about the hidden costs that I glossed over at the beginning of my journey. I'm on my third belt and about to run out of holes again. I've had to repurchase several dozen other items from my wardrobe myself simply because this works. It took me 38 years to grow that large, and only one to properly shed the waste I was carrying everywhere. So, if you really want to make a difference for yourself in the way of a healthier, happier you, ditch the standard American diet and follow the Fat Burning Man. The podcast and advice are free. Just beware of the hidden costs." Winky smiley face. Joe, congratulations, and thank you for making me giggle. I love a good bad pun, but 80 pounds is just incredible. So I know also having coached and worked with a lot of people who have been putting weight on for a long time kind of feel like that's the only thing that's going to happen. They've kind of lost hope. I'm really psyched that you're back in action for you. I'm sorry about the hidden costs. I know. I don't like shopping either. But I'm sure you look great in your new belts. But if you are listening or watching and you took your health into your own hands, you have a story that you'd like to share with me, or if you'd even like to come on this show, sometimes I really like having listeners on to talk about their experience, and I just recorded a few that'll be coming out soon. But anyway, get in touch by going to fatburningman.com, sign up for the newsletter, just hit reply, to the email that I send you with a bunch of goodies, and say whatever you want to say. Unfortunately, social media, some of the comments and notes and even the long ones can get lost because there are just so many social media platforms. There are so many inboxes and so many chains and whatever. The easiest way to get in touch is always going to be at our websites, and you don't have to go through all of the other junk of social media either. And if you'd like to support this show, then be sure to head on over to wildsuperfoods.com to get your own health boosting goodies. These are the health supplements that Allison and I have been taking on an almost daily basis for many years now. And, just in this past year, we've been able to launch and now get them out to you to help support our own content and make more free content for you guys. And there's one thing worth mentioning when you select the Ultimate Daily Bundle, which comes with Mega Omegas, our probiotic spheres, as well as the vitamin D stack and Future Greens. You also get free access to the Fat Burning Tribe, which is our online coaching community, and tons of recipes and online content that's just for you. So go to wildsuperfoods.com to check that out. Only in the US right now. Hopefully we'll be able to do something internationally down the road. But you folks who are international, or even if you're stateside, be sure to check out our educational programs in fat loss, fitness, New Year's, Wild 30 challenges, giveaways, all of that. Sign up for the newsletter at fatburningman.com. Check out the shop for some of the educational programs. And hopefully we'll be able to add a buy Abel a coffee button for just like $3 or $5 at a time sometime soon. And that can just be a way to support us directly. All right, on to this throwback episode from 2012 with Nora. You're about to learn why so many people fail on Atkins or modern day keto or carnivore or some of the other ways that people are eating these days, how medicine ceased to be a profession and became a profit-oriented industry, how you can limit your exposure to EMF pollution. I've actually got some EMF supplementation below my feet while recording right now. How Nora lost 25 pounds without exercise, eating butter by the stick, what it's like to live by the Arctic Circle among wild wolves, and tons more. Let's go hang out with Nora. All right, folks, today we're here with Nora Gedgaudas, a clinical neurotherapist and author of the wonderful Primal Body, Primal Mind. How are things on the West Coast, Nora?
The West Coast is absolutely gorgeous today. We have cool temperatures and clear skies, and, fall is in the air, and you got that sort of magical lighting going with the sun at the angle that it occupies in the sky this time of year, and it's just very nice. And it's a Friday, so how bad can it be?
Nice. That was very poetic. I like that a lot. Awesome. So I'd like to start with this. Can you give us a little bit of background about how you became interested in the evolutionary approach to nutrition, physiology, and the brain as well?
Oh, man. Well, you say this is only like an hour-long program.
Right.
It's such a convoluted trail. I took up an interest in nutrition back when I was in my teens and began sort of devouring, if you will, books on the subject in a variety of ways, and took up study of sort of nutritional science in college. And I was also interested in anthropology. And I, at one point, had started to pursue a double major in those things, but I couldn't imagine for the life of me, this is how compartmentalized my thinking was at the time, how those two things could possibly mesh. So anyway, long story short, I eventually came across the work of Weston Price, and I think that was what opened the floodgates for me, the awareness that, of the way in which our ancestors ate and how different that was from mainstream recommendations about what, constitutes a healthy diet. And that opened the door to me to thinking more in terms of our more distant ancestors and how the diets of those people that were our earliest ancestors would have possibly shaped our physiological makeup and our nutritional requirements, how that might reflect on what our needs are today. And so I kind of started down that path, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago now. And it's been in and of itself a gradual evolution, again, if you will, no pun intended, but,
I'm a
and
sucker for puns.
yeah, exactly. Thinking about this, one other thing that did have a rather profound influence for me was that I actually spent, again, my life has been very cross-disciplinary.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of different things along the way, and one of the things I did one year was I spent a whole summer of my life living less than 500 miles from the North Pole with a family of wild wolves.
Really?
Yes, yeah, long story. Fairly industrial strength religious experience, and
Oh my
pretty
gosh.
transformative for me on a lot of levels. And I was there basically helping to conduct behavioral research. And I was in the company of within that genre, a very famous wolf biologist. His name was Dr. L. David Meach. He's a dear friend. And he was quite well known for his work with wolves all over the world, arguably the world's foremost scientific expert on the wolf.
Wow.
And he had found this family of wolves back in 1986 up there on northern Ellesmere Island, and was going up every single summer and spending the summers basically, he had managed to habituate to this family of wolves, found the den and all that, and every summer went and lived among them. And one year I got invited along, and so spent the whole summer there. In fact, at one point he came back down to Minnesota because he had some business to conduct. So he had sort of left me up there, and then he came back a couple weeks later, and but it was a profound experience on a lot of levels. And one of the things, and we're so digressing here, one of the things that struck me is that I'm sitting out there on a permafrost laden tundra, and it's a bit of a thermal oasis there, and there's definitely plant life growing and everything else in this particular area.
Mm-hmm.
But there's permafrost just under the ground. And I'm looking over this landscape, and there are the remnants of all these ancient human cultural sites all over the place in the area where this wolf den is. Some of these sites have never been touched by archaeologists.
Amazing.
So you can see, the bones of the animals that they hunted, some of the tools laying around, some different things. And I found myself, and at the time, I was eating a mostly vegetarian diet. It wasn't totally vegetarian by any stretch of the imagination, but at the time, I kind of had it in my head that was probably the healthier way to be. And so I was eating all these, fresh vegetables all the time, which I still do, by the way. I probably still eat more vegetables than most vegetarians do, but but I just really hadn't thought it out well enough. And there I am sitting on the tundra, and like the last thing on my mind was a salad. All that summer, all I did was sit there, look out over this frozen landscape, and all I could think about was fat-rich food. In fact, I sat there on my duff, and I ate bags and bags of nuts. We brought all these provisions with us. There was some hunting that we did. There were other things that we brought that were packaged. And I was eating, salami and cheese and all I was just obsessed with butter. And
Yeah.
we go to there was a weather station some distance away from us that we made a pilgrimage to about once a week so that we could, thank you, take showers, and maybe make a 5-minute phone call back home and all that thing. And so the OIC at the officer in charge at the station, knew about us and gave us permission, when we came at usually 3 in the morning. It was 24-hour daylight, so you couldn't really tell if it was 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon. And said, you're welcome to come in and use our facilities and make a quick phone call, very quick. And if there's any food laying out in the mess hall, you're welcome to it. Well, they always had this great big bowl of butter. And then they had bread sitting off to the side, which at the time made a great vehicle for the butter for me.
Sure.
I would take, a slice of bread, I'd toast it, and I'd put about an inch of butter on it. And I just stand there, hovered over this little station, and I would make slice after slice, and it wasn't the bread, it was the butter.
Yeah.
And I thought, what the heck am I doing to myself, doing this? But it was an interesting obsession. And as I sat there and thought about it, I realized that fat would have been pretty gosh darn important to people who lived at these sites that came across along the way. That that vegetables were not a particularly practical food. I was eating fat-rich food, and I couldn't stop eating. And by the way, I lost about 25 pounds that summer.
Really? Wow.
And got almost no exercise at all. Because we were mostly sitting around watching wolves sleep, or, watching them play around the den or whatever. And if we followed them on their hunts, we were on four-wheelers when we did that. So, I would take walks occasionally in the evening, but there was not a whole lot of physical activity involved with this. And if, in fact, if we stood up and walked around at all while the wolves were hanging around the den and they could see that, it was rather upsetting to them. They were totally cool with us as long as we just sat there.
Yeah.
If we walked around. So I found myself sitting there wiggling my toes a lot, trying to stay warm, layers and layers of stuff. But the thing that your body uses to keep you warm is primarily fat.
Yeah.
And so my furnace was stoked. I was burning logs, as I'm sure you're familiar with that analogy that I kind of to be known for now. And, not bothering with very much kindling at all, because it just didn't make sense. And I lost a ton of weight. And I never forgot the lesson of that in the course of my interest in nutrition, which just really took a new turn after between that experience, which was really a big seed that got planted in my mental state. And then as soon as the Weston Price thing, as soon as I came across that material, it just exploded.
Wow.
In a whole direction. And so that was a catalyst for me. And it's gone through multiple evolutions. It's gone through evolutions since the time I published my book.
Really?
And my thinking keeps growing in these areas, and I become better and better at distilling things down, at thinking things through. I'm pretty careful about my facts these days. I become increasingly convinced that the central role that fat really plays in our physiological makeup and should be playing in our dietary makeup.
Yeah.
And so it's led me to where I am now. And of course, I don't know if you attended my talk at AHS 12 or not.
I did, yeah.
Cool. So the whole ketogenic approach to things, I decided rather than come at this from the standpoint of carbs are bad. And we've all grown weary of that whole debate. Well, some people just, they're almost OCD about it, and that's all they can think about, and they just sort of brown. Everybody's sort of tired of it, but people occasionally keep asking. And but I'm thinking, I need to come at this from a different standpoint, because it's not just about the idea that carbs maybe aren't the best thing for our health, but it's how important that really is.
Yeah.
There's the old Atkins approach to ketogenics, which is eat lots of protein.
Right.
Which isn't really a true ketogenic diet, as it turns out.
Because it becomes sugar, yeah.
Because your body will metabolically convert and burn that protein. It's not that it spikes your blood sugar to eat a chicken breast or something like that. There was a big thing online recently where somebody did all this research and they said, well, it didn't spike my blood sugar at all. Well, no, it's not going to spike your blood sugar, but you are going to, if you've been accustomed to burning carbohydrates as your primary source of fuel, and your body has come to expect that, your body will become eminently efficient at converting whatever it can to that fuel as well, if that fuel is immediately available. And protein is the next most logical thing, and it will do it on an as-needed basis. So you're not spiking your blood sugar, but you're still perpetuating that same metabolic cycle in the process.
Right.
And I think why so many people failed on Atkins, because they never really ceased to be sugar burners in a manner of speaking. Dove into all kinds of carb substitutes and all that crazy stuff. So they maintained that weird processed substitutes for carbs, most of which were soy-based, and don't even get me started. But they also, over-consumed protein-rich foods in the belief that you couldn't over-consume protein-rich foods. And that's, I think that understanding, or that way of thinking, has shifted some in the consciousness of the paleo community, and even some of the leadership of the paleo community that previously promoted protein-based diets. Fat is sort of a free metabolic fuel. It doesn't seem to have, ironically, it's the one thing that's been most vilified throughout the last 100 years, and it probably is the single most important component if you want to relegate, something being more important than something else. Fat seems to have a real central role to play in the functioning of our brain and nervous system, in our cellular membranes, in the way we manufacture our hormones, and maintaining also healthy energy levels. And we are designed to burn one of two types of fuel. And we'll burn either carbohydrates, in other words, glucose, or we will burn fat, or free fatty acids and ketones.
Right.
And that's what we're designed to do. And different fuels have different values under different circumstances. But I don't think we were ever designed to rely on glucose as our primary source of fuel. And yet that's taught in medical schools. That's what's taught to conventional nutritionists and dietitians. And I don't know if you saw the article that, oh gosh, I don't even know if I still have it up on my computer at all here. I can look around. There was a blog post written by somebody by the name of Dr. Briffa, who I think is over in Great Britain. And the title of his blog post was "Diabetic Transforms His Health with a Low-Carb Diet, and His Doctor Urges Him to Eat More Carbs."
I did read that. Totally absurd and so common, too.
Yeah. That particular diabetic, I mean, just to bang my own or blow my own horn for a second, it turns out had read my book and had decided to make major changes to his diet based on what he read in my book. And it transformed health. It transformed his markers all went into just beautiful normal ranges. And his physician said, "Oh my God, this is amazing. What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, actually, I've given up carbs and I'm eating all this fat and whatever." And he blanched, and I think it's maybe his heart stopped beating for a second, and then he immediately just started, in a worried fashion, saying, "Well, you have to eat starch. You just have to." Or he said carbs, and he said, "Well, I'm eating vegetables." He said, No, you have to eat starch. That's the way physicians are trying to think. But of course, we all know you don't go to medical school to study health. You go there to study disease and how to treat the symptoms of disease with basic pharmaceutical agents and surgical and other expensive medical procedures. And medicine somewhere during World War II ceased really to become a profession and became an industry, and very profit-oriented industry. And so have as a healthcare system today, of course, is primarily a disease management system. Nobody's really profiting from foundational thinking and restorative measures to health. It's more about, you can't do anything about a disease once it takes hold, so let's just treat the symptoms and, hope for a good outcome and then take out whatever undertaking industry. But
it is, unfortunately. And I'm trying to have more and more doctors who are coming on board with this overall message in this community, because we need more and more of them. And it's even my own doctor, when I go in, it's pretty hopeless, unfortunately. it seems. And I've tried to talk about fat versus sugar burning as well. I've tried it both ways, and I've been a fat burner for quite some time now, a few years. But I can say, and my background, in the brain and psychology and all of that really fascinates me with the way that my brain feels when I'm using different fuels. And it's pretty shocking, the difference. It really is a roller coaster ride when you're burning sugar. And, I've run marathons and all of that. I've always been a runner. And so they say that you need to eat lots of starches, lots of sugar, those little goo packs and all of that. And it's kind of like nitrous for a car. You are supercharged for a little while, but then you get sick or you crash. And I can say, being a fat burner primarily now, there's something that is just, it feels almost more regulated. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but I feel centered. I feel much more balanced, and I feel like I can think much more clearly.
And you can, as a matter of fact. There was an interview between Peter Attia and, oh my God, I forgot his name now. He spoke right after I did at AHS 12.
Okay.
But at any rate, he was talking about the value of ketogenic diets in cognitive functioning, and that it seems to have a particularly enhancing effect on cognitive functioning, which it makes perfect sense. The brain is made of fat, and brain needs a tremendous amount of fuel, and nothing provides more energy per calorie or per gram or whatever than dietary fat. And ketones in particular is what the brain is really beautifully designed to make use of. In fact, we're born in a state of ketosis.
So interesting.
We're literally born to rely on fat as our primary source of fuel. And that have the quote from the Journal of Neuroscience Research states that once the onset of suckling takes place, ketone bodies become the major fuel for brain development. So, and of course, apart from coconut oil and palm kernel oil, the richest natural source of medium chain fats, which are the most ready source of ketones, is human breast milk. They're not saying that, yes, we have so much sugar in breast milk to fuel the human brain. They're saying that the brain basically runs when we're born off of ketones.
Right.
And it's not until we introduce a carbohydrate-based diet that people start to overly rely on ketones. So, it was Dr. Andreas Einfeld. That was his name.
That sounds familiar. I think I was taking a coffee break after your talk, unfortunately. Well, let's talk a little bit about ketosis for the people who are just kind of dipping their toes into this lifestyle, who might not be fully aware of what it means. And it can be a scary topic. I know a lot of doctors are scared off. I think you mentioned in your book, most people, when they think of ketosis, they think of ketoacidosis, which is very different. So can you just kind of give a basic primer about these two different things?
Yeah, well, ketosis is a state in which we're, very simply defined. It is a state in which you're relying on fat as your primary source of fuel. I don't know who wouldn't want that, right? To put it in that state, put it in that context is the simplest way of putting it. Diabetic or ketoacidosis, it's most commonly manifest in what you call untreated type 1 diabetes. This is a pathological metabolic state, and it's marked by extreme and uncontrolled ketosis, in which, normal, ketosis is a real functional aspect of fat-based energy metabolism, and that tends to be induced by either prolonged fasting or a very low carbohydrate diet. Acidosis, what happens is that your body has keto acids that basically alter the pH of your blood pretty substantially. They'll lower the pH, make you highly acidic, and that's a potentially life-threatening condition. We all walk around, we're all supposed to be walking around with a pH somewhere between 7.35 and 7.45. People in state of ketoacidosis, when you start to dip too far, you start to go in either direction too far. So fasting or consuming a diet very low in carbohydrate is going to, even in a type 1 or type 2 diabetic person, is really going to lead to a state of ketosis, but not ketoacidosis. Ketoacidosis is a fairly rare condition, and unfortunately, the two get conflated together. And I think that it was, Jane Brody of the New York Times who, popularized the idea that ketones were toxins, and that, we need to avoid the production of ketones at all costs. Well, that's, of course, wrong. And in fact, it's an incredibly important and viable source of fuel for us. When you first decide to go on a low carbohydrate diet, your body is going to start manufacturing ketones. And a lot of people run out and they buy those urinary keto sticks, at the drugstore, and they pee on them. Look at all the ketones on me. I'm in ketosis. Well, that's just not accurate. I mean, you're probably producing a lot of ketones, but you may not yet be adept at making use of them. Like putting diesel into a gasoline engine, it's in there. It's in there circulating, but you may not be able to make use of it.
Right.
As it takes time to make that metabolic conversion to relying on sugar as that primary source of fuel to one that relies on fat as a primary source of fuel.
Right.
And so just because you're throwing off ketones doesn't mean that you're burning them. So initially they do get thrown off like a waste product, and people might find that their breath is a little weird, that they're giving off maybe some, weird body odor or something, as your body starts to excrete ketones both through your skin and through your bowels and through your urinary tract and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
That's a short thing. That's a very, very temporary condition until your body starts to figure out, wait a second, we're throwing away the only fuel that this person's giving us. We've got to figure out how to make use of it.
Mm-hmm.
As your body goes diver on you,
Yeah.
it starts the conversions that it needs to suddenly now make use of this much more efficiently produced type of fuel.
Right.
Even the slenderest person listening to this program right now has roughly 20 times more stored available fat at their disposal. Doesn't it make sense that would be the design of what we're meant to make use of?
Yeah.
And so, sugar is rocket fuel. It's designed to kick in as a primary source of fuel during times where we're in a state of fight or flight,
mm-hmm.
or we're exerting ourselves in some extreme anaerobic fashion.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it shines. That's, where we're designed to make the best use of it. And you can kind of like to fueling maybe a Formula race car. That race car can really move around the track, and it may look really cool while it's doing it,
mm-hmm.
but is that the car that you really want to take and rely on for your cross-country trip?
I just did one of those, and it's certainly not in a Formula One racer. Now, can we let's go back a little bit to how out of touch we are. Now, a few decades ago, you were pretty much living at the North Pole. I wouldn't imagine there was a heck of a lot of technology around you. These days, it seems like every year or two, there's another gadget that's in our hands or by our bedside, another computer, another TV. So what sort of effect does that have on our physiology and on our brains? Right.
So, electromagnetic frequency pollution, of course, is this very, very new thing. I'd say 10 years ago or more, more like 15 years ago now, when I first got started in the field of neurofeedback, which is, the brain training stuff that I do.
Right.
A lot of people know about. There was a pretty even mix of people who came in a state of functional underarousal as those coming in a state of functional overarousal. And I know you've got a neuroscience background, so I know you have a grasp of what that is. But
mm-hmm.
when you're in a state of underarousal, you're, as a form of maybe depression, of just sort of a low energy brain state, and where you just can't get it going. And overarousal is more of a chronic state of fight or flight, where people are going to be very anxious, is just kind of a general way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
And we would train accordingly, I should say, based on certain frequencies, certain training frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
We'd use higher frequencies for people who were functionally unaroused, and that seemed to work well for them. And it was on a case by case basis. People came in, and we'd make a determination on which direction we thought the training needed to go, and we would select frequencies accordingly and then adjust those frequencies based on people's responses.
Mm-hmm.
The years went by that increasingly there seemed to be more and more people coming in that were requiring lower frequency training. And I thought maybe we were just sort of self-selecting or something, although it really did seem to be a changing client population.
Right.
I found that it dialed frequencies lower and lower and lower as time went on, literally to where, past a certain point, pretty much everybody was training at low frequencies. And where, just as an example, now this is sort of ancient history and neurofeedback talk now, but back in the early days, we were training like 15 to 18 hertz or whatever for, the average person, or somewhere between 12 and 16 or 17 hertz or whatever
mm-hmm.
for people. And within a span of less than a decade, your average autistic person maybe was training after a while at maybe, 6 to 8 hertz or something like that. Nowadays, I don't train anybody that high anymore.
Wow.
People's neurological states seem to be increasingly overaroused. And most people, I'd say, walking loose are in some varying state of fight or flight. I won't say everybody is. There are always supposedly exceptions to the rule. But I'm sitting there scratching my head, going, what could possibly account for this shift?
Right.
Our equipment requirements, I mean, past a certain point, we all hit basement that we never even thought we'd have a reason to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And then, a $10,000 training system became a piece of junk. and buy a whole new system. And I've since bought a whole other system that now gets regular software updates that allows for expanded capability. And, there are people getting trained as low as 1/10,000 hertz.
Wow.
Now, it could be argued that there are things going on at these frequencies that we think that there's central organizing principles at these infralow frequencies that may have had a value to go to all along. And I think that that's probably true. In fact, we may even be on a glial level with the infralow frequencies that we're training. Mm-hmm. And it's a different training than it used to be. But what interests me is how we got there.
Yeah.
And that's the question I ask. I'm not saying that you can't get positive effects from training those higher frequencies in some people anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm saying it's something that drove us to go lower and lower and lower. And some of it was a learning curve, but I'm telling you, some of it was that people just kept needing it, needing lower, needing lower, needing lower. So anyway, one thought that came to mind, actually a friend of mine brought it up, was that it might just be EMF pollution. 10 years ago, I knew people that didn't have cell phones. Nowadays, everyone's got them. And regardless of whether we have them or not, we're all being inundated by this high-frequency electromagnetic, sort of pollution. Mm-hmm. And you go to a website called antennasearch.com, and you type in your zip code. It will tell you how many cell towers you've got within 4 miles of your home. I have 67 cell towers.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and there are like 300 other types of antennas. There's no way to escape those tendrils. They're everywhere. Yeah. And there's no, we know from research, from really well-conducted research now, that EMF pollution will either generate or exacerbate excitatory activity in the brain and nervous system. Mm-hmm. I actually think, and part of the evolution of my thinking has begun incorporating concepts now, and I don't have that research right in front of me, but there's been some very interesting research published on the effects of space weather on, in other words, solar particles, high-charged now coming in, where the space weather is very, very different now than it was a decade or so ago.
Mm-hmm. Watch out for that solar wind.
Better believe it. And a weakened magnetic field that is making the effects of those solar particles much more pronounced on our nervous systems. And they do find that during periods where there's solar maximums, there are higher rates. There's more war, there's more unrest, there's more violence, there's more anxiety in populations during those time periods. So I think that there are probably all kinds of, I think that there is sort of a convergence of different things coming together. Carbohydrate-based diets are anxiety, and, the state of the world that we're in, just from a psychological perspective, is anxiety-provoking. I mean, you'd have to be either living under a rock someplace or, I don't know, completely stone dead from the neck up, to not be stressed out by what's going on in our world, and everything from the economy to our environment, to the whole political arena and the whole corporate thing. And we could get all Alex Jones and go really crazy here, but it's a nutso world that we're in. And so my attitude is, I'm not a fear monger. My attitude about things is I'm not paranoid simply because I am informed. It's not about being informed. And that information, it's not hard to realize that we've got stuff coming at us that our most distant ancestors couldn't have even begun to have fathomed. Yeah. It's just a world with very different demands on, we have a very primitive physiology, and the modern world in no way are we designed to deal well with that. there's a lot that's going on that's really outside of the realm of our immediate control.
Mm-hmm.
The drum that I like to beat is that we have to take control of what we can. We don't have the room for error, the room for indulgence that maybe our grandparents or great-grandparents had. I think with each subsequent generation that has suffered the effects of the food industry, for instance, or of environmental degradation, or, if you look at the whole sort of pot and cats scenario,
right?
Each subsequent generation becomes increasingly vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And the current generation, it just doesn't have any room for error anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's the idea, that take control of what we can. Let's try to do what we can, take the principles that serve to evolve our physiology, nutritional requirements, and apply those to modern conditions, apply those to, modern longevity science as a means of optimizing these principles. And truthfully, I don't know that it's possible to be optimally healthy anymore.
Yeah.
And if you cannot afford to be sick, and nobody can that I know of, then you can't afford not to eat optimally well.
Right.
And I don't care if somebody else decides that they want to eat their carbs. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But my interest is just in saying, this is what I've come across, this is the way I see it, and you can take that information, do with it whatever you please.
Yeah. Now, on that point, this is kind of an interesting one because I think everyone has a different definition, but we throw around terms like low carb, controlled carb, high carb. Is there a numeric value that you personally assign to that?
Well, I don't know that anybody's ever calculated a safe minimum exposure to, dietary sugars and starch. Mm-hmm. Because where all sugars glycate, and we're not talking about the controlled enzymatic glycation that we need in order to do our metabolic processes. We also need some free radical activity in order to do our metabolic processes perfectly. That doesn't mean that we need to consume free radicals in order to be healthy.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to say about that part. But in order to maintain a state of ketosis, in order to stay in a state of ketosis, we need to kind of stay below a threshold of about, 50 to no more than maybe 60 grams of carbohydrates a day.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is that we don't have to get any of it from dietary sugar or starch.
Right.
You're going to 5 or 10 grams a day. There's no way to totally avoid glucose or some form of sugar or starch in our diets. There really isn't. So you're roughly going to get 5 or 10 grams of sugars in the protein that you consume every day, in the meats that you consume.
Mm-hmm.
You get another 10 or 15 grams from things like fibrous vegetables, even though they're primarily, very low carbohydrate. We still get some.
Sure.
There are going to be a few grams in nuts and seeds, a few grams if you decide to eat some fruits or berries, you'll get some of that. And so the idea is to keep it to a minimum if you want to maintain that state of healthful, well-adapted ketosis.
Right.
And, that's the whole thing. It's whatever we choose to do. But if that's what you're wanting to do, that's the way you've got to do it. And not only that, the other trick, and it's kind of an important one that gets overlooked a lot, is that it's really important that we keep our protein consumption to less than about 25 grams or so, which is about roughly 3 ounces or so of meat, fish, or eggs in a single meal. And each ounce of meat is roughly 6 or 7 grams of protein. So just you can use that number 7 if you want. And I oftentimes recommend in the beginning that people get themselves a cheap digital food scale that can measure things in grams and ounces or whatever, and just weigh it out raw before you cook it so that you get a sense of how much that really is.
Right.
In a meal. And once you get used to doing that, you don't have to do it for very long. I don't like regimens. I don't like having to be overly formulaic when about things, but it's kind of important to get a sense of what you're doing going into this.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get the hang of it, you can eyeball it. After that, that's what I do.
Yeah.
I don't think that every time.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people that seem to have a real problem with getting into that fat burning zone, and they're just like, well, I'm just not eating any carbs, and I'm just sticking to the protein and vegetables and whatever. And it's like, okay, you're probably overeating protein.
Yeah.
Could be other things going on as well, and that's something I actually I have amassed a tremendous amount of material now on where people get tripped up,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll be doing something with that in the near future. But
Very cool.
but one of the easy things you can do, and Jimmy Moore's doing this right now, is you can go out and get yourself a good ketone meter. And I'm not talking about keto sticks. Don't waste your money on those things, the things that you pee on.
Mm-hmm.
You're literally measuring ketone levels in the blood. And it's just like a glucometer. You go and you can buy these things online. There are a couple different kinds. Anyway, so by definition, you are in a state of ketosis. You're kind of in a more optimal state of ketosis, somewhere between 1 and 3 millimolars of ketones.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have one of these meters, that's what you're shooting for. 1.5, so much the better. That's usually a good threshold of millimolars of ketones. It means that you're in a functional state of ketosis. So that might be a tool that some people can use to better kind of tailor what they're doing, and it'll help your awareness of what you are and maybe aren't doing right.
Right.
So,
very interesting. And how much do those run you?
Oh, well, the meters are very inexpensive. Where the expense comes in are, in fact, some diabetic supply companies and things like that literally give the meters away,
Mm-hmm.
or they're just maybe 10 or something. But it's the strips, they know they're going to.
That's how they get you.
Now, if you're not a diabetic, though, it doesn't end up being that expensive. And because it can cost anywhere from $3 to $6 for one of those strips, do your measurements once a day. Pick a certain time of day. You're more likely to have low ketone levels in the morning than you are, around the day. So pick a time of day and do it roughly the same time every day if you can, and just kind of keep tabs.
Mm-hmm.
On how things are going, and try to make adjustments accordingly. If in doubt, lower the amount of protein you're consuming and increase the amount of fat. Sounds crazy, but some things are so crazy they actually work. So
and fat is good.
Fat is where
Fat is king. So we're coming up on time, but before we go, why don't you tell the folks out there where they can find you and what you're working on now?
Well, you can find me at my website at www.primalbody-primalmind.com. And my book is available through my website. Actually, it's a little better for me if you purchase the book through the link on my website, but you can actually find it in many online sources as well as in most of the bookstores out there. It's in just about every bookstore. And, the stuff I'm working on is really, I've got so many irons in the fire right now. It's hard to know. I'm not privy to talk about some of the more exciting stuff, but I have some, collaborations coming up, sort of celebrity collaborations, if you will.
Cool.
That I think are going to be a neat thing. I've got a couple of new ebooks that are going to be coming out, things that are going to be sort of downloadable, whatever site, that I think are going to be really, really provide some really, really genuinely helpful material for people. And I'm going to, of course, be at PaleoFX. I'm also planning to do another tour, or planning to speak again in Australia. And I'm going to be also going to New Zealand next year. And
wow, very cool.
All kinds of things. Yeah,
it's an exciting life you live.
It's definitely never a dull moment. Sort of feeling a little drawn and quartered some days, pulled in a lot of different directions. I still have a very active clinical practice, and I'm also planning to do a lot more in the future. Maybe doing less with the clinical practice and more with things going on my website and elsewhere. So be sure when you go to my website to sign up for my newsletter, sign up on there. There's going to be a lot more coming in the very near future. A lot of really exciting stuff, and I hope you guys, stay in touch.
Awesome. Well, Nora, thank you so much for coming on. This has been really interesting and helpful, and we'll have to have you on again soon.
Thanks, Abel. I really appreciate you inviting me on. It's a real privilege.
You bet. All right. Thanks a lot.
Hey there, listener. Thanks so much for listening to the very end of this episode. As a special bonus, I'm including a new original song that I made up just for you, live on the spot, as part of my new improv music video series. I hope you like it. You can check out hundreds of these original songs and more for free at abeljames.com. Here we go.
that's all I need. Little bit of sugar, baby, that's all I need. 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 Baby, that's all I need.
This episode is brought to you by listeners like you and Future Greens. You may know that I'm not a big fan of most supplements. It's hard to know if you're getting what you paid for. And even worse, many supplements, juices, powders, and greens we've tried taste terrible. For example, have you ever noticed that most powdered vegetable mixes taste like fish tank? Don't even mention fish oil supplements. Once you've had fish burps, it's hard to trust that brand again. So that's why Allison and I have spent the last 3+ years creating wild superfoods. And it's our goal to give you the very best nutrition the world has to offer. Now you can get the concentrated nutrition of 15 organic fruits and vegetables plus 6 other superfoods in one extremely convenient, ready-to-go package. We call it Future Greens. And if you're looking to improve your health, performance, and well-being by doubling your intake of fruits and veggies without the sugar and carbs, you're going to love it. With Future Greens, you can whip up your daily green drink in less than 30 seconds, no matter where you are. The certified organic stevia gives it a subtle sweetness and it tastes great in water or juice, and we think it even makes our green smoothies taste a whole lot better. It's made with certified organic, non-GMO fruits and vegetables to aid in detoxification, balance your body's pH, and give you a boost of clean energy without sugar, caffeine, or the dreaded crash. No junk or artificial sweeteners, and just 1 gram of sugar per serving. With the tasty wild berry flavor, you and your kids won't even realize you're eating broccoli and 20+ powerhouse fruits, veggies, and adaptogens. So if you want to try our brand new creation from Wild Superfoods called Future Greens, we have even better news for you. As a listener of Fat Burning Man, and it's proof that you are because you're listening right now, you can actually get a 20% discount to try Future Greens yourself. Just visit fatburningman.com/greens to get 20% off when you select subscribe and save. Once again, just visit fatburningman.com/greens to check out Future Greens and get your special listener deal. We'll see you there. Well, hey there, listener. This is Abel one more time, and I just want to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Fat Burning Man Show. If you liked it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you might be listening to or watching this show right now. And if you have a second, please leave me a quick review for the Fat Burning Man Show. I read every single one of them, and every time you leave a review, it gives us a little boost in the rankings, and that helps other people find this show. And if you can think of someone else who might enjoy and benefit from this free show, please take a second to share it with a friend or a family member. And if they're like, what is this Fat Burning Man thing? That's a really silly name. You could be like, you're right, but here's the deal. We've recorded over 250 episodes of the Fat Burning Man Show with thought leaders in health from all over the world. And so far, we've won 4 awards, hitting #1 in health in more than 8 countries internationally. We have more than 30 million downloads already, but we're just getting started. I can't believe any of this, by the way, and couldn't do any of this without you, so thanks once again. But here's some more good news. You can download and listen to every single episode of the Fat Burning Man Show for free with 0 outside advertisements, no outside sponsors, and no corporate overlords. All you have to do is type in fatburningman.com. I'll give you a second here just to type it in, fatburningman.com. And you'll get all the show notes, transcripts, and video and audio versions for all the past episodes of the Fat Burning Man Show for free. Better yet, enter your email at fatburningman.com, sign up for my newsletter, and I'll even send you a quick start guide so you can take your health into your own hands right now, along with a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes as a special thanks for signing up. Once again, just go to fatburningman.com right now, enter your best email to get your free goodies with a bonus surprise straight to your inbox. This is Abel James signing off. Thank you so much for listening once again, and have a great week.